Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to another edition of our water issues seminars. I think those of us working in this field long enough have started to realize that you can't change one thing without impacting another thing that you didn't want to impact down the road, right? And this morning, our speaker is going to tell us about work that she has been doing at the Cardinal Creek Conservation Area in Eden Prairie. Work that illustrates this critical importance of upland restoration and enhancing wetland health and the interconnection between these two ecosystems. Chris-Ann Lauria actually comes to us as an accomplished professional already. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in nursing and also has a recent degree in environmental science. And she's focused on restoration ecology and climate change adaptation strategies. She is currently with the Minnesota GreenCorps in the city of Eden Prairie's Forestry and Natural Resources Department. She has transitioned from a successful career as a nurse practitioner to her current role in environmental stewardship. She serves as board manager for the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, dedicated to managing and protecting water resources and prioritizing flood control. Chris-Ann co-founded Restore the Nine, a grassroots community organization dedicated to restoring and preserving the woodlands, wetlands, prairies, and waters along 9 Mile Creek in Bloomington. Chris-Ann, hey, it is great to have you with us, and I'm glad we sorted out your presentation online. The floor is yours. Take it away.
All right.
I'm
now,
sorry. I'm going to jump in and say
Oh,
this
yes.
is being
And
recorded.
I didn't do it. Right. You are being recorded. Thanks, Katie.
thanks.
Okay, now
Well,
take
if
it
only
away.
you could sort out my my anxiety this morning, Mark. So, it's really humbling to be presenting to all of you because you're obviously experts in the field and I'm the novice. So, thank you for being here and being willing to listen to my presentation. As a GreenCorps member, my projects this year were not directly related to water issues. However, my work did have some indirect benefits. So, I'll try to make that connection for you this morning. So I was asked to kind of present my projects as a GreenCorps member or a one specific project. And so as Mark said, I'm going to focus on, I wrote some ecological restoration management plans for the city of Eden Prairie, and I will focus on the Cardinal Creek plan. But to start, I should probably review MPCA's goals for our GreenCorps projects. And I do have them listed there. The primary goal is to enhance community resilience by addressing various environmental objectives. And so, that includes addressing climate justice by reducing disproportionate negative environmental impacts on vulnerable populations, as well as reducing solid waste, increasing recycling, decreasing greenhouse gases and pollutants, trying to diminish our water runoff, stormwater runoff, and just in general, encouraging eco-friendly behavior in our communities. And so this is accomplished through 4 different GreenCorps topic areas. The 4 are the stormwater and forestry, energy conservation and green transportation, waste reduction and recycling, and then community outreach and readiness. And I'm in the stormwater and forestry tract, and the MPCA objectives that I addressed with my service projects this year were primarily restoring and conserving ecosystems. However, as I think I already mentioned, there are going to be secondary benefits from doing that, and that includes carbon capture, reducing runoff from the landscape into the wetlands, which hopefully will result in improved water quality. I also worked with Friends of Eden Prairie Parks, a nonprofit organization, and organized multiple events throughout the year that really encouraged community participation and sustainable practices. But that group is just, that community is just really pretty awesome in general. I feel like I've learned as much from them as I gave this year. Again, one of my biggest projects this year was writing the ecological restoration plans. Again, I wrote 3 plans, or I wrote plans for 3 conservation areas and for 1 park. Before I go more on that project, though, I would like to start with a working definition of restoration. As you know, there's a lot of debate over the use of that word. What are we restoring to is a plausible question. For my purposes, restoration is an intentional activity aimed at helping an ecosystem return to a healthy, sustainable, and functional state. And it may not necessarily return to an exact pre-disturbance condition. And our urban and suburban and rural landscapes are so modified and have undergone so many natural and anthropogenic disturbances that restorationists have to ask themselves, which pre-disturbance condition are we trying to achieve? And we need to find one that's reasonable. So, ecological restoration plans really are a document that provide a solid framework to guide the process of repairing and improving these landscapes. The aim is to improve really the 4 main ecosystem services. So our provisioning services, so maybe it's allowing foraging in our parks and conservation areas so people can pick berries and mushrooms and medicinal plants. And then we have our regulating services that really promote essential processes such as water filtration, carbon storage, soil stabilization, etc. And then our supporting services, which sometimes seem to overlap with the regulating, are fundamental services such as the water cycle and photosynthesis, habitat provisions. And then finally, our cultural services, which are really non-material benefits that contribute to the development of people. Cultural services provide a spiritual connection, cultural identity, and many forms of recreation. So in our suburban landscapes, and I say suburban because I'm working in the city of Eden Prairie, but this obviously applies to urban landscapes as well. What are our problems? When we look at these landscapes, what do you see are what I call micro disturbances. We all know them, right? The impervious surfaces, the salt application during the winter, industrial pollutants, and the lack of riparian buffers. Some people will call this lakeshore beautiful, but many of us cringe when we see it. Impervious surfaces, we know they're problematic. Water hits the shingles on buildings, it hits the pavement, concrete, it doesn't infiltrate into the ground, and it ends up in our stormwater sewers, unfiltered. And that's in comparison to areas where we have a lot more natural ground cover. The vegetation really absorbs the stormwater into the ground, helps slow it down, and prevents that runoff going unfiltered into our sewer systems. What factors influence erosion and runoff potential? All of which are impacted by suburban development. Our soil characteristics, organic matter, the topography of the landscape, and obviously the vegetative cover. Is it invasive? Is it native? Those all have a significant impact. So restoration really directly addresses the vegetative cover, and over time can impact some of those other factors that influence erosion, including the soil characteristics and the soil organic matter. Ecological restoration can also reduce soil erosion, sedimentation, nutrient transport, and flooding. It increases organic matter in the soil profile because of those deep rooted plants. And again, thereby improves wetland quality and lakes, streams, any water body by stabilizing that soil and filtering that water runoff. And, you know, we can do that by planting those native grasses, sedges, forbs, shrubs, and trees. Ecological management improves water quality. Let me step back. Ecological management of our upland areas and buffer zones improve, if we're using our best management practice, can improve water quality. Again, we've kind of already covered these topics. And we've all seen this slide before, comparing our lawn grasses to our native grasses and plants and their respective root systems, and how that can obviously really slow down runoff. So what's in an ecological restoration plan? What goes into it? So key components to the management plans that I developed are first, site information, and that includes things like the landscape context, geology, soil types, the hydrology, historical vegetation, and historic and existing land use. And then there's some sort of a ecological evaluation that gives us some understanding about, again, the historical management, and really kind of determines our overall vision for the site. And it will include things like plant surveys, which will identify what we have growing there, our invasives versus our natives. Then we have our site project plans. So when I wrote this management plan, it was really like kind of an overall plan for that entire conservation area. But as you know, like you can't do that with one project for multiple reasons. Funding is a big one. So I have, within those plans, I have site project plans. And so for the Cardinal Creek Conservation Area, you'll see that there have been multiple projects within this kind of all-encompassing plan. And then restoration methods and guidelines. This will include a timeline for the site preparation, and management activities, and then any monitoring that's going to have to take place throughout the project and afterwards, reassessing it, and then evaluating that work and seeing how we may need to modify things. It really also depicts who will do the work. Will it be staff members, contractors, volunteers, etc. And then appendices and information sources also go into that plan. So where does the content come from? Well, it comes from a lot of places. I did a lot of Google searching this service here. The USDA has been really helpful, especially with their web soil survey, giving me an idea of what kind of soil we have in that area. Minnesota DNR and all their resources have been really helpful. Obviously, Bowser, I was able to get a lot of information from the Board and Water Soil Resources. In my case, the City of Eden Prairie's Natural Resource Department was helpful. They had some prior park management plans from previous supervisors in that department, and then a whole bunch of other resources. I scoured through old newspaper articles, like literally the paper articles that residents gave me. I had multiple interviews with residents who have been here for 50 years. This historical society had some helpful information. Environmental engineering studies had been done in the past. A lot of surveys, plant surveys, scientific journals, and then the GIS data as well was helpful. So how did I figure out what the historical and existing vegetation was in this area? First of all, I looked at the original public land survey, Field Notes of Minnesota, and I don't know if you guys have a better way of accessing that information, but I was literally reading like the handwritten notes that were in cursive. Thank goodness I still know how to read cursive, to try to figure out what they had to say about the area. Then I used the field guide to the native plant communities of Minnesota. Very helpful. Lots of plant surveys. Again, the Natural Resource Department had done some, engineering firms had done some. I know I had some surveys from Bar Engineering. And then we have citizen science. And so a lot of residents are using their iNaturalist and eBird and the Zooniverse, and I would get emails and text messages all the time with people sending me pictures of plants and animals that they saw in the area. And then meandering surveys as well. So we did some meandering surveys. You just kind of meander through the site and what do you see? As well as, that's something that residents and community members are going to use more than these very structured surveys. So my plan, I did follow a ecological restoration model. I just kind of created this for myself. And you start with your impaired ecosystem and you take a look at it, you develop some goals and objectives, you evaluate the existing condition of the natural, first of all, you evaluate the existing condition of the natural communities, and then you identify your restoration goals, really addressing the ecosystem services again. For this particular project, the City of Eden Prairie was really tasked with enhancing biodiversity and improving the habitat for wildlife species, and also engaging and educating community members. And then develop plans for the restoration goals and the management activities. Include determining your methods and techniques. How are you going to go about this restoration? And then obviously you got your monitoring and evaluating, which is really an iterative phase where we'll continue to observe and discover new things and then adjust our decisions based on what we've learned. So I developed an outline for this restoration plan that eventually became my table of contents. I know it's a little hard to read, but I'll go over some of these, some of the content soon. Again, I mentioned that the restoration of Cardinal Creek Conservation Area was systematically implemented in more than one phase. It was actually 3 phases. And the first phase began in 2017. And that is this area here in the green. And then in 2020, we got some more money. Or the city of Eden Prairie got some more money. I don't recall who funded that project, but then they did the restoration on this orange section here. And then the project phase that we're in right now is this red area, the middle phase, the middle section, which is somewhere between it was originally supposed to be 1.5 acres and somehow it managed to be 2. And that's where we are now. So the goals for phase 3, again, were to increase the native plant species diversity in this 2-acre degraded wetland and transitional zone area by 25% within 5 years, as measured by annual vegetative surveys. So we got our SMART goal in there. And then we have our objectives. And primary one was to really connect those 2 previous projects, the habitat restoration project, so that the whole thing was done. Again, provide some public education, remove those invasives, and reintroduce some native species. So a little bit more on the site location. Cardinal Creek Conservation Area is located in the northeastern part of Eden Prairie. It is west of Bryant Lake, which you can kind of see a little corner of here, and also west of I-94. And it is bordered by homes on all the other remaining sides. And it does follow the 9-mile creek valley. So the conservation area is really comprised of a wetland complex, primarily one big wetland. It is bordered by some steep slopes. It also contains a floodplain that's really prone to seasonal flooding. So the water levels, obviously, they fluctuate. Some ephemeral, there's one ephemeral pond in there. And then it features this, so you have the wetland and then you have the buffer zone, which is really like a wet prairie ecotone that separates the wetland from the uplands. And there are actually kind of 4 areas here. We have like an upland that is a little more open, and then we have what was probably traditionally a pretty wooded area. Well, maybe it was more oak savanna-ish, I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to know because there's so many invasive species in there, but I think historically it was primarily oak trees in there. And, you know, of course, those uplands, well, the whole entire area is really populated with native and invasive vegetation. The buffer zone separating the wooded uplands from the wetlands had a lot of garlic mustard, motherwort, burdock, Canada thistle, narrowleaf bittercress, and then this kind of steep slope, or the upland areas, more upland areas, had some red and bur oak, cottonwood, maple, buckthorn, prickly ash, and honeysuckle. And unfortunately, the wetlands are really dominated by brush vegetation, invasive narrowleaf, and hybrid cattails. I would really like to get a donation for marsh master, because I would just love to go into these wetlands and just take down those cattails. But we need like $150,000 for that. Okay, so our first step, what is it? We got to find the money. So after we establish the goals and objectives, we have to find that money from somewhere. Phase one was funded by phase one of this phase three project was funded by the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. Those restorations began in 2017, and that was 3 years after Discovery Point, where the district is off their office is. The 5-acre property and home site was donated to the Watershed District. And so after it was donated, they decided to do some work on that project. And then phase three, which is our current phase, was funded by a 9 Mile Creek Watershed District cost shared grant. So the next step was really to remove those invasives. So you can see in this picture, like this is just a wall of buckthorn. There is a wetland over here somewhere, and then there's a ephemeral pond over here somewhere. And then you can see a wood walking path up here. You really can't see much. The site had, when I started last summer, the site had really large pockets of, like I said, buckthorn, prickly ash, and honeysuckle, and they just prevented the native plants from growing. And then over the fall and winter, they were removed. How did we remove them? You know, pretty much use everything in our toolkit, a lot of weed whipping, brush cutting, hand pulling. We did treat stumps with chemicals. And then of course, because it's by the wetland, we used a water safe glyphosate herbicide. And we did some broadcast spraying as well. So we're going to pretend that our site is pristine and clean, and we are ready to plant. So what's next? Well, we have to choose our plant communities. And as I mentioned, I really had like 4 different plant communities or ecotones. So what information did I use to determine which plants and seed mixes we'd use on this phase of the project? Well, I started with the web soil survey and determined what kind of soil is at the site. And what I found is that 36%, so the highest percentage, soils was a Muskego and Houghton soils. Both consist of very deep, very poorly drained soils that are formed from herbaceous organic matter or material on floodplains, which is pretty consistent with what we saw there, right? And then I looked at site hydrology and the geology. Again, I know it runs through the 9 Mile Creek River Valley, or Valley. It's part of the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. The wetland complex drains to Bryant Lake, through which 9 Mile Creek flows. That's, I believe, another significant disturbance when they put I-494 in there. It drained, I think, much differently. And then we also looked at I looked at the geology description. And I looked at the historical vegetation. I used that public land survey. We use plant surveys, both formal and informal. You know, the formal techniques can be your transects, your plots, quadrants, meandering surveys. And then this particular one, these plants were recorded by Bar Engineering. And that was done back in 2002. And then I used this nice field guide, historical vegetation field guide. And going through that, well, first of all, this field guide is awesome once you figure out how to use it. I think I could have benefited from a full course on utilizing this resource. These are the three of the four ecotones that we really focused on, and they each have different plant communities. So using my field guide for my wetland edges, I decided that the plants in the MRN 83 Northern Mixed Cattail Marsh were most consistent with what we're currently seeing and what has historically been seeing. And I went through the same process to figure out what species should be in that wet prairie and also in that woodland area. But I had to choose seed mixes and plants for the grasses, the sedges, the forbs, and the shrubs for each ecotone, which really became quite complicated. So, here we go. What do we need and where do we need it? Those are our ecotones. We have to decide if we're going to use seed mixes, plant plugs, or were we going to use custom seed mixes, standard seed mixes, and then the different plant communities for each ecotone. So one way I determined whether I would use seed or plant plugs was based on how difficult it is to propagate plants by seed. And Prairie Moon Nursery has this really great cultural guide that I used, and it really it lists which seeds or what plants are difficult to propagate by seed. And so here's a list of them. And so these are the ones where I wasn't going to even bother adding them into a custom seed mix. These are the plants, if we could get them, we just ordered plugs. As I said, I ordered standard seed mixes and also some custom ones that I mixed myself. I had to order the plant plugs for each kind of wetland indicator status, because some of them were facultative wet, some of them were, facultative upland, and others were just obligates. They needed that. They need their feet wet. So remember this slide when I go a little further ahead, because this is definitely, this was a lesson learned. So we got all of our plants in, we did all of our seeding. I want to show you some more before pictures. Again, here is this walkway kind of going through the wetland, is over here. Do you guys see it? Does anyone see it? No, can't see it. And then this is kind of in the process. So, they're going through here and they're just mowing this stuff down because there's just really nothing of value in there. And then this is after they went in and cut that all down. It's like a significant difference. And then this was this spring. Here's a picture of, actually this was taken just a couple weeks ago. We had seeded in this area and we also had planted a couple times. And you'll see that you can actually see the marsh here and all of those invasive and hybrid cattails. But this is our kind of an ephemeral wetland on the other side of the walking path that again you couldn't see before, and now it's in view. And this is looking toward up the slope. You can see there's a residential home up there. And we can actually see some native trees in here that aren't completely crowded out and covered by buckthorn. And finally, some results. Here are some close-up pictures that I took of the area. Is it looking better to you? We have a little anise hyssop here, some yarrow here, and there's a sedge here, but honestly, I don't know what it is. If one of you can tell, I would love to know. And then lessons learned. So I had 4 different restoration projects that I was in charge of managing. Well, first writing the overall management plan, and then choosing the plants and seed species for, and getting them ordered. So I've learned that when you have multiple projects in progress, you really have to have an organizational system that is going to make some sense come spring, when pounds of seed mixes and thousands of plants are being delivered. So really having a good spreadsheet. I thought I had a good one until all this stock arrived, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I have here. I figured it out, but it was a little anxiety provoking. The other big lesson I learned was don't overcomplicate. In an effort to be cost effective, because I know it's really important, and also to maximize species diversity, I scrutinized every standard seed mix and plug stock at Prairie Restorations, Prairie Moon Nursery, M&L, Natural Shores Technology, Blue Prairie, Glacial Ridge Growers. I don't know, what did I miss? I scrutinized them to see what they had and to find the best value for each ecotone. So, have you ever ended up with spreadsheets that look like this? You know, when you have an Excel document with multiple tabs and each tab looks like this, you know you've overcomplicated it. And that's what I did. So I realized that I just can't, I can't afford to do this in the future. So again, like, I was trying to make sure I got every species that was in that little field handbook in my seed mix or in my plug tray. Yeah, it just really became challenging. So, and then the third lesson learned was really figure out where your resources are, and talk to someone who knows. Carly, my site supervisor, had that field guide on her bookshelf, and she gave it to me, and it was very helpful once I figured out how to use it. But also, just like that web soil survey, that is just a cool website and fun to play with, and really gave me a lot of information. And then just using the Hennepin County GIS maps was really helpful, as well as the City of Eden Prairie GIS map. So really, it really came down to not being shy about asking where to get some of this, and not thinking you just have to find it on your own. And so that's all I have. What questions do you have for me?
Thanks so much, Chris Ann. We do have, I think, a question in the chat. Oh, well, first, would you mind sharing your slides? Sounds like Reed is giving a presentation for his apartment complex, where he's advocating for planting more native plant gardens, and then left his email. And then we had a comment from John. I've had the same experience trying to read/interpret the original PLS field notes. Not sure if there is a better way. So if folks want to type questions in the chat, they can go ahead and do that. Or if you want to unmute.
I hear that they're revising that field guide. Whoever they is, I don't really know who's doing this, but.
Yeah, Jesse, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. My question is, I've got a similar project. I think my the people that are doing this project in Duluth, they did the same thing. I saw their plant list. It's massive, and it's over about 7 or 8 acres. And here's the thing: it's probably going to be a couple $100,000, and there's no deer fence around it. How are you? I mean, even if you could successfully get things to grow, I mean, you're so vulnerable to deer. I just think, I mean, if you're going to spend that much money, you probably could have got a fence for $25,000 too. I mean, because, well, what happened with you with deer browsing and herbivores and everything? How much really survived? I guess that's my question. Because I understand we're in this new phase where we do have so many native seeds to tap, but I don't know if we're really prepared to see it succeed because of just the challenges with deer too. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I mentioned earlier, I was in charge of 4 projects, and one of them was at Miller Park, and we actually put up a deer fence. We put 4 enclosures up for that restoration. It was a woodland restoration, and those woodland plants are just expensive. And so we just couldn't afford for them to be browsed. And so I researched deer fencing, and we put up, I think, 15 by 15 foot, 4 15 by 15 foot deer fencing enclosures, or exclosures, I should say. Now this Cardinal Creek project, I don't know. I don't know. They're coming up. They say that the deer don't eat the natives as much as they'll eat, your cultivars. We've seen deer in there, but I do see plants coming up. They don't look browsed. So I don't know. I guess we're just crossing our fingers. That's something I'm going to have to ask my site supervisor. Like, what's her thoughts on this? Like, is it like, okay, let's just see what happens? Like, because part of the problem obviously is we've got too many deer. We just have too many deer in these suburban settings. But people like their deer. I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
Matthew put a question in the chat. Could you talk about the long-term management plan and how that will be sustained with the group of partners?
Yeah, so long-term management is really going to be a joint project with the City of Eden Prairie Natural Resource Department, Friends of Eden Prairie Parks, nonprofit organization. It's a relatively new group. They've only been around for like a year and a half, but they are doing amazing work out there. Currently, we do have the ICWC crew that is helping with a lot of our invasive species management. The 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, that's their property butts up right against it. And so they will assist. And then, hopefully we'll get grant money from somewhere to kind of continue some of these projects. But it will be a lot of spot spraying, that corn. I think that's the big one, is just keeping that buckthorn down and then continuing those invasive species pulls. you know, it's amazing. You pull out all the buckthorn and it looks great. And then you come back the next spring and you're like, oh my gosh, what is all this narrow-leaf bittercrest doing here? It's like another invasive just takes over the area. And so like we pulled that and garlic mustard. So then we pulled that out and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to see next spring? So we just hope that those natives are going to kind of take over, and we are just, between all those partners, are going to just have to really be vigilant about keeping those invasive species out of there. So that's really, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's really the long-term plan for this particular conservation area.
Awesome, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now. Again, if people have them, feel free to unmute or type them in there. Usually once I start wrapping things up, we get another question. So I'll just give people a second.
Well, I have one, Chrisanne.
Of course.
If we're waiting for one or two other people to put their questions in the chat, it's really interesting to see the slides that you put together that demonstrate how many different aspects have to come, how many different areas have to come together to make something like this possible. I mean, everything from the funding to the plant species that you are trying to control the invasives, to the plant species that you're trying to introduce, to the citizen component. Each of those seem like they could be a seminar in and of itself. And it seems altogether daunting to me, actually, to think that all of that has to come together. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, looking back, what do you think would be the probably the most challenging aspect of doing a project like this and doing it again? You know, I suppose it's kind of a trite question in a way, but I mean, what would you do differently? How would you approach it differently? I mean, it seems to me like the best laid plans here are subject to being changed radically because of things beyond your control, right? And I'm kind of wondering how you might approach it differently if you're going to do it differently at all.
Yeah, good question. Well, you know, one of them is I am not going to go crazy, like I said, with trying to get every plant species, you know, because there's always round two, right? Like, and of course that I didn't think about that, right? Like I just want to do everything perfect because that's just how I am. I want everything in there. And so I think I would just being more realistic about the diversity, and knowing that, you know, we can plant again next fall and we can, or this fall, and we can plant next spring. We don't have to have every species in there right away. That was a big one. I really think the city of Eden Prairie, those residents, man, they are really, really protective of their environment, and they're really proactive with helping. And just the fact that we had so much, so many volunteers helping with these events, it's essential, because there's no way a natural resource department can do this alone. There's just no way. But they, you know, they have park stewards in their group that organize events every week during the spring to get out the garlic mustard and get out the narrow leaf bittercress, and then they do it again in the fall with their buckthorn cutting. And so I mean, I think that community engagement is absolutely essential. And that's one thing that Carly really has done well, as she has worked really collaboratively. The city of Eden Prairie has MOA with this nonprofit, and so they work together. It's not a nonprofit that is kind of just doing their own thing like you will see in some communities. It's really under the guidance of the Natural Resource Department. And I mean, I just think that is something that is almost essential. Carly has told me numerous times that there is no way she could have done this without a GreenCorps member. You know, we all know about our budget cuts. It sounds like we have a GreenCorps program again next year. But again, just having service members like that who enjoy doing this kind of work. I really like ecological restoration, which is why I kind of just grabbed onto this project, or projects, I should say. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question like you wanted me to, but I just think community engagement, in summary, community engagement is a must, and using all your partners. I organized a lot of events, and that it included the watershed district, it included Friends of Eden Prairie, it included local businesses, and just other community members in general. So getting all of those, and I pulled in everybody. I pulled in other GreenCorps members, and I pulled in the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa members. Like, I took help from wherever I could get it. And I just think it's essential. Otherwise, you'll just never get the work done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you answered that very eloquently. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or any hands up, so I think we might be able to give people a couple minutes before their 10 o'clock meetings and wrap up a bit early this morning. Thank you so much for your presentation and your time. It was very interesting, great information, and I think something that you know, everyone can take a little bit from and implement in their own lives and own communities, hopefully. So thanks so much for your time again, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.